Hi everyone, happy Wednesday, and I'd like to talk today about Ascension Day, which is tomorrow. Ascension is one of the high holy days of the Episcopal Church, one of only 7 high holy days, so a very important day. And I feel like it's the high holy day that we tend to forget about because it's always on a Thursday, 40 days after Easter, 10 days before Pentecost, and we tend to forget about services that happen on Thursdays. So that doesn't make it any less important, and our hymnal has a series of hymns that are devoted to Ascension. And they start on number 214, and I'd like to just briefly discuss 3 of these hymns that I think are particularly interesting. Hymn 214 has a very familiar tune, the Landfair tune. Bum 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 ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum bum. But this text is by Charles Wesley, who is, along with Isaac Watts, probably the most important hymn writer. And by hymn writer, I mean the writer of the words. One of the most important hymn writers in history. Wesley and his brother John founded the Methodist Church, but for most of their lives, they were kind of the liberal wing of the Anglican Church that prioritized congregational singing and the music of the people, and the evangelical wing of the church also, in that they wanted a more personal experience with God. Wesley Famous said that he felt his heart strangely warmed, and that emotional content of worship was very important to them. But Charles Wesley has a way of saying things that are very, very simple, but very sound theologically and conjure up really vivid images. Verse 4 of this hymn: Lord, beyond our mortal sight, raise our hearts to reach thy height. There thy face unclouded see, find our heaven of heavens in thee. It's basic, it's easy to understand, and I know that I couldn't write it. It's far more sophisticated than it initially appears to be. If you turn the page, on page 216, we have a hymn that happens 3 times in our hymnal, Hail Thee Festival Day. You probably remember this hymn associating it with Easter. I usually station this at the end of our Easter service, and also on Pentecost Sunday. Hail Thee Festival Day comes back. And all 3 of these settings are the same tune, same harmonization by Ralph Vaughan Williams. It comes from the 1906 hymnal in England that he edited, which is the most important hymnal in the history of English hymnody, or Anglican hymnody in terms of impact. And something really interesting happens here. So the Hail Thee Festival Day chorus is the same for the Easter setting, for the Ascension setting, and for the Pentecost setting. But the words are different when we move to the verses. And that's obviously because different meanings of High Holy Days call for different words. So I find that interesting that we have the same hymn 3 times that links together those 3 High Holy Days, Easter, Ascension, and Pentecost. And what's even more interesting about the Ascension setting is that on Easter and Pentecost, this hymn is in F major, but on Ascension, it's in G major, just transposed up a step. And that's deliberate because it's a way of representing in music, symbolizing the Ascension, something that's higher. Something you might not pick up on because you're not comparing settings when you're singing this hymn on Ascension, but very interesting indeed and very deliberate. The last hymn that I'd like to discuss that has to do with Ascension is on page 222. It's the last in the Ascension section. And the tune name for this is Parker, and you'll see that the music was written by Horatio Parker. Parker's not well known for his hymn tunes. This hymn tune called Parker is because it's his most famous one, and if you were to sing it, it might not ring a bell. But the name Horatio Parker is incredibly important in the history of American music. He was the very first professor of music in the country at Yale University, and also an active church musician. His principal position was Trinity Church in Boston. And Parker was really responsible for an entirely new school of American music. There was a movement in Boston to come up with a romantic music that was particularly American in style. And this group of 6 composers called themselves the Second New England School. And that means that they were moving beyond William Billings, who was a part of the first New England school 100 years ago. And it also imitates the first and second Viennese school in the history books. First Viennese school, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven. Second Viennese school in the 20th century, Schoenberg, Berg, and Webern. So they kind of stole that label for American music. And Horatio Barker is not the most famous composer in that circle. Edward MacDowell and Amy Beach probably are, but nevertheless, he was extremely important and not only had a major church position, but was the very first professor of music in the United States. So if you have a chance to look at your hymnal, explore those 3 hymns and their texts, and think about them, or sing them, even better, tomorrow on Ascension Day. Take care.